Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Locology 2020. I'm Mike Boland, Senior Analyst with Locology and your conference MC. So our next session is Out of Home, finally a seat at the table, question mark. That question mark is key because Out of Home is constantly resurfacing in its status as the next growth area in local marketing, but now it's really a leading format in terms of its growth curve, pandemic adjusted, of course. So to tackle this, our moderator Dan Height is going to sit down with out-of-home giant OUTFRONT Media. So let's get right into it. Dan, over to you.
All right, thanks, Mike, and welcome everyone to Out of Home, finally a seat at the table. Our speaker today is Andy Sriubas, Chief Commercial Officer of OUTFRONT Media. Welcome, Andy.
How you doing, Dan?
Good. I'm glad you're here. Not everyone knows what OUTFRONT Media is, so you can do a brief intro on what OUTFRONT Media is for the group before we get started on our questions.
Sure. You may not know what OUTFRONT Media is, but you certainly know what we do. So we are one of the largest out-of-home companies in the United States. We've got a little over 400,000 individual locations where we post advertising, both static and digital. 70,000-ish billboard faces around the country, and we focus mostly on the big markets, the NFL markets.
All right. Well, great. That's a lot of signage. 4,000 or 400,000. Excuse me. So your background was investment banking. What interested you out in the out-of-home space, and can you define the out-of-home ecosystem a little bit more broadly?
Sure. So to start with your question. So yeah, I was an investment banker for about 25 years and covered the media, technology, and telecom sector. Got an opportunity to join one of my clients, if you will, when CBS spun CBS Outdoor off to when we became and changed our name to OUTFRONT Media. The reason that this was pretty exciting for me is because there is not a transition opportunity in the media sector as exciting about as this could be, right? So we're taking something that has been a traditional business, probably the second oldest profession in the world, from cave paintings all the way to today when we have digital signage on the side of highways, and turn it into a measured media that competes with mobile and desktop and television and radio in a heads-up way. Can we deliver a number of impressions around a specific audience over a period of time that leads to an objective filling campaign for a particular client brand? If you put that in the front of this, posting signs on walls is the simple way to say, I'm creating an audience for you and creating an objective opportunity for that brand. And this really has an opportunity to digitize itself and transform into that business.
And what is the out-of-home ecosystem? It's not just billboards. What is it overall?
Sure. If you think about us broadly, it's about a little over $8 billion in a pre-COVID year in terms of an industry market spend. And it includes billboards. It includes transit signs. So if you go into a subway, on a bus, on a bus shelter, it includes movie theaters. As you go to a movie theater, there's pre-roll before that, a pre-show as they call it. If you go to a gas station, there's screens in the gas pumps. If you go to a restaurant, there's opportunities to advertise on tables, or literally if you walk into any kind of convention center or you walk into a stadium and watch a football game, all the ads that are around there, it's location-based media that targets a particular audience at a particular time, and usually with some sort of a psychographic fulfillment. So you know what the person is doing if they're driving down the highway and there happens to be a Home Depot half a mile down off the exit. Right, or a car dealership. You can get people in the mood for doing something that you'd like them to do as a brand.
Yeah. So out of home has been getting more digital, both in terms of the actual screens and in terms of kind of the targeting and attribution. You mentioned that earlier, using location data. How's this been transforming your business, but also your culture as a whole?
Interesting. And that's a huge question, right? We could spend another half an hour just on that, transforming culture around this stuff, as you and I have talked about many times in the past. But if you start to think about media as it compares to other things, and I talk a lot about value comparison as we talk about to agencies and brands and internally about our company, which is we used to be about a medium where you put a screen on a wall or a sign on a wall and you say, okay, people are going to pass this. And you know it intuitively. It's a high trafficked area. I'm going to get some audience here. Hopefully it'll deliver some sort of an objective. When you think about it in a digital world, you start everything from the infrastructure. So on one side, I want to put digital screens here. So I'm going to take what is an opportunity to put one poster and turn it into an opportunity to put multiple video pieces of content. And that influences people in different ways. It takes into account the time of day, the weather, any kind of other triggers that you might do in digital media, whether it be mobile or desktop, and understand how that now functions as an edge device. And then getting that, so the second piece is the workflow. How do I get an ad from a brand or an advertiser to that screen? So I'm digitizing the workflow, if you will. It all becomes a digital file as opposed to paper and paste as it used to be years and years ago, but I understand what I'm going to get at that particular time. And I can move that ad around from one digital screen to another digital screen based on where I think the audience is going to be. The third piece is what you mentioned, is sort of the location data. So now I have a much more granular understanding of the people that are going past a particular spot. Privacy protected, of course, and all thoughtfully done, but let me understand the audiences to which I'm trying to market this particular product, right? I'm looking for millennial Hispanic females who happen to be soccer moms because I've got a product I want to get to them. Well, where are they over a particular period of time? Let me try to understand that better from location data. And we're going into all of the things now that every other media is facing, which is GDPR, CCPA, the new iOS 14 release as it comes out next week. We're starting to think about privacy in a much more protected way, and we have been for years, which is we need to be generally an aggregated data set. We need to sort of be privacy protected, but yet we can still give guidance through some probabilistic modeling to advertisers and their agencies to make sure that they are getting what they are trying to buy. And again, going back to objective-based marketing. The last piece is that value comparison. So if I could then price something and say, hey, you're getting these people over this period of time in this way, I'm getting to a CPM type calculation for our media, which is relatively new, right? Or cost per thousand impressions delivered. Now I can compare myself to television and radio and mobile. So if you take a mobile ad, they're all fantastic mediums, by the way, and we work well with everyone. But to the extent you have a mobile ad, which is a very small thing on top of an app, right? Relative to a 14 by 48 digital billboard on the side of a highway, they're different, but I can't click on the digital billboard. I can click on my mobile ad, so there's value there. But that impression that you're getting on the side of the highway isn't interrupted by anything. It's certainly it's brand safe. So I've got all the things going for me that could be helpful to driving a CPM relative to other media. And now I can start thinking about two different signals in the marketplace. I've got a digital signal through the billboard. I've got a digital signal through mobile. Put them together, and I should enhance the value that you would have had by buying each individually. Yeah. That's the mobile ecosystem, or the digital ecosystem around that.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. So you're not climbing poles and clicking on the billboard ad?
I wish. I'm not allowed to. They get very mad at me if I try to climb poles without the proper licenses and things.
So how did your location data strategy change or evolve as COVID started taking place?
Oh, good point. To be fair, it's been a phenomenal godsend, which is to the extent that we have the ability to communicate better with brands and agencies about the actual impressions that are being generated. So in the beginning, you would imagine, so middle of March, the world just sort of dropped off, stay-at-home orders became prevalent, everybody ran home, and you saw that from the data that we were collecting and using to be able to assess audiences. And then it started to come back. And it came back faster than I think most people thought it would come back. Clearly, in a major city like New York, where there was a bigger issue than some other places, it came back slower, or is coming back slower around transit or some of the other places where it's not as prevalent, where audiences aren't as prevalent today. But let's just pick a random city in the United States. People still left their homes to go to the Walmart. They left their homes to go to get groceries. They left their home to get gas for their car. They went. So the boards that were on the way to the downtown office building may have less traffic, but the boards on the way to Home Depot probably were increased in the number of traffic around different time zones. So you could start to talk about with a client about the value of a particular location based on the traffic that's there. And our data set was able to do that. And we were able to pick up the phone, be very positive and forthright with our clients to say, you bought this, there is true value here because we now have the ability to show you audiences over a period of time. Or you just make the assumption, the general assumption, that nobody's traveling, nobody's doing anything, everyone's home in their car. Well, actually, that's not true. And we can see week by week as the traffic built up over a period of time, we're now as a nation over where we were pre-COVID. Now, granted, there's seasonality and a few other things, but as a general stuff, we are back. Some of the major cities slower than others, as we talked about, but we can start to tell a story and drive a discussion around value in an asset that we could not before we had this data in place.
Mm-hmm. So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about 5G. So what does 5G and the amount of infrastructure that the carriers are going to require, what type of impact does that have on your business?
Well, quite significant, and I hope even more, which is with our poles all around the country in major cities, there are limited opportunities for the carriers to put more poles out. Mm-hmm. 5G, as you know, as a technology, requires more points of presence than a 4G or 3G signal as it went through that, or an LTE type environment. So carriers are going to need more places to put their attachments, and those from Verizon or T-Mobile or AT&T and the rest. Now, even IoT devices and others, as they enable autonomous vehicles and this stuff, is important. We have a humongous pole sitting on the side of most highways around the most big cities. It's an opportunity for us to integrate that technology and that telecommunications device with our pole. And that allows us to have a second revenue stream to be able to do that. Secondarily, to the extent that we can with some sort of a data opportunity, are there ways for us to be able to help the municipality with whom we're working to be able to assess where traffic is moving, how transit trains are being filled, that type of stuff, so that we can have a richer experience for the folks that are around that particular location. So 5G and its technology and what it does and what it'll empower going forward, especially in an Internet of Things world, is a significant opportunity for us, because I see ourselves as a media company first, for sure, but as a location-based data company as well, that allows you to impact technology as it evolves and to bring that ecosystem more to a sort of a mesh world around the major cities where we have our locations.
Oh, that's great. You mentioned autonomous vehicles. So let's dig in that a little bit. How do you think the long-term growth for autonomous vehicles, how is that going to impact the out-of-home industry overall?
Well, it's interesting. We had a lot of discussions about this in the past about, oh no, everyone's going to be driving in their car, not driving in their car, reading their phone, faced inwardly, so they're not looking out at our billboards or the rest. And there are some draconian scenarios where that's going to happen tomorrow, and you can get into this world of the future. But as you know, whether it's Tesla or the new set of cars that are being released by Chevy or whomever else, that is a world that's far away. There are levels of autonomous in vehicles that will sort of evolve to get to a point where people can actually sit back and not have to worry about a steering wheel. For now, they're going to still have to do that. That being said, think about the telecommunications opportunity I was just talking about before, which is we will enable those cars to be able to do what they do through our communications opportunity or telecom if we can sort of build that as an opportunity for us. And I think that's important. We're thinking about that. We're spending some time with it. It is a future-driven business. It isn't days, but we're setting the infrastructure for that.
So if the media becomes less valuable for certain instances, the infrastructure is still very valuable for other instances.
Yeah, but I also think, it's nice to think about and to sort of say, oh my God, no one's going to look. This is a well beyond the cycle in terms of where we think about now. Media is going to be very important for as long as I can see in this space for a period of time. We're not going to have 300 million autonomous vehicles driving around the country where no one looks at billboards. I think it's still important. Plus, our business is not just billboards on the side of highways doing 60 miles an hour. It is a lot of local places where maybe you're not as autonomous, or it is a lot of places that are not necessarily driven to, like a transit system where you're present all the time and walking around and or sitting on a subway or a bus or some sort of a commuter train. So a lot of this business is going to survive well into the future. I have no doubt about it.
Sure, great. So the out-of-home industry was really the only traditional, air quotes, media that was growing, and then COVID hit, and the country was told to stay at home. How has this impacted, OUTFRONT and the out-of-home industry? I'm sure this is not something you were going into Q4 or even to Q1 planning on a global pandemic and shut down your business. How has this impacted you guys and the industry overall?
Well, it's certainly taken us back a step. I'll tell you, sitting around our table and our senior management table in the middle of February, world had just had come off a great year. Our industry was doing very well, as you said. We were feeling about, here's the momentum coming as we apply technology and data and everything else to how we go forward here. And then the pandemic hits. I think we took an assessment as an industry of all the things that are important to us and that we're sort of bringing the media value forward, which is the fact that this is non-skippable. It's now measurable. It can be delivered digitally. So there's a lot of good things that COVID proved. Traditional media is still very viable, especially traditional home media is very viable. I'm glad I'm not in newspapers or magazines or some of the other businesses that are going to be affected more cyclically, more traditional, more pronounced than certainly we are.
Are these changes long-term for how people commute, work, and live? And this is just, will this impact the out-of-home industry with specific venue types like airports, malls, and transit? Like, how are you thinking about this?
I think it's a short-term fix. I think people will come back to where they used to be. Their sort of muscle memory is going to sort of jump back to the things as they used to be. I do think there's a pent-up demand to get back to some sort of a normalcy. While there will be changes, and I listened to a podcast over the weekend that said these rules were dumb anyway, which is work from home a little bit. Make sure you can take a beer out of a restaurant with a cap on it so you can go home somewhere, right, with it, or drink that. Some of the things they were sort of dumb, and it'll fix those. But I do think cities like New York they're going to come back. They're going to be strong. They're stronger than they were. If you think about 9/11, if you think about the financial crisis, there were predictions of doom for the big cities, for all of that. No one was going to live above the 5th floor of a building anymore because of 9/11. And while legitimate and in the moment certainly concerns, over time people get comfortable with the world as it then exists and sort of come back to normalcy and understand that cities and traveling and all this have real big impacts on their lives, how they want to run their lives, how they want to run their entertainment. And we as an industry sit between all of those different venues and sort of fix our mix around how people travel. So even if it changes, there are other places for which we can focus on. So a board here may be less valuable, but a board there may become a lot more valuable because of the travel patterns or things. So maybe if work from home on Friday is more than just what used to be, more people do that. Great. So the boards we have in locations just outside the city will have more value to our advertisers as that becomes a Friday thing.
So things might mix a little bit, but on the whole, it's going to be similar to where things were before long-term for you, in your view.
Absolutely. And I would add to that, as we start to, as you and I know, add mobile to a lot of the packages that we sell and we add other media to it, it becomes a lack of a better term, multi-touch attribution environment where we start to think about holistically surrounding an objective that a marketer has with assets that can be then put to work on behalf of that objective. And we just become a good big part of that as we go forward, especially as we said, where you can start to bring value comparison and real audience data to the fore.
Yeah, you mentioned mobile data. And using mobile. How do you guys view privacy and some of the continued changes that the operating systems overall are making? What does that mean for use of this for out-of-home planning and measurement, at least long-term? How do you guys think about that?
Yeah, well, let me start with, we have always been 100% sort of privacy by design. We certainly want to be anonymous and aggregated as we go through this stuff. And it isn't something that we take lightly at all. So privacy is very important. The ability to target ads, though, is also important. And so we want to make sure that the dollars that are being spent by our advertisers are done so in such a way where they're getting value for that spend. So we have to do it thoughtfully. iOS 14, which we talked a little bit about before, which is like what you're referring, probably some changes that we're going to see with Android, which would be similar about getting permissions with regard to each app on what third parties can collect data. While first parties still can do that, or first party data can still be collected, third parties are going to be a little difficult to use it for these types of things. Senator Wyden's letter to the FTC chair a few weeks ago talking about how this data, we have to look into how ad tech is using data like this for purposes that may not necessarily be as disclosed as they should have been when privacy has been, when permissions have been granted. So yes, it's going to certainly change the entire ecosystem. It's going to change what mobile and desktop and television, and we all use as data sets. And I think it's probably for the best to be able to sort of level set the field. So we're all going to get to a point where we have to do some probabilistic modeling. We have to do some real thinking about how we as advertising companies think about audiences and their movement, it isn't going to be as very specific as it used to be, which is an advertiser used a data set out of a specific app that they paid for that data from to target this person at this period of time. Well, great and efficient at one point in time, not necessarily doesn't jive that well with what CCPA and GDPR and a lot of the things that Apple and Google will probably do are going to do to impact us. So it will become, it's going to be fine. It will become more probabilistic, but we have to find the right data sets and use them in the appropriate ways to be able to make ourselves on the right side of privacy, which is where we want to be.
Yeah, and you mentioned aggregated. I'm sure even from the out of home world, since you are, seen by many, not individual, not one to one, you're one to many. I'm sure that bodes well with just how you guys think philosophically as well.
Yeah, we have a one-to-many medium, as you say, and it really does. If in one ways people would say, well, it's less targeted. Okay, but it indexes very well against a bunch of audiences, and I always want to make sure I point out to someone who's buying a billboard, hey, you also get all the collateral audiences as well. So brand isn't just about getting Dan Hite to do something tomorrow. It's about getting a group of people to sort of understand what's going on with that particular brand association and what's available to them as they go forward. And so you may be part of the target audience that we're trying to get at a location, but the benefit of that advertising does go to others. And if you think about the CPM that we're going to pay to get to Dan, it may be a little less of the CPM to get to the person next to him because it's not as targeted as it should be, but there's still value there. And I want to make sure that we do that in the most appropriate way. So I don't lose sleep over the new way we're going to do business. I know it's going to be a lot of work, and I know we're going to have to work with our partners across different media to try to figure it out. But I do think out of home comes up to sort of meet the rest of them as they come back down to less specific targeting. We come up to a little bit more and use better, thoughtful, and useful data to be able to do that.
Yeah. Last question. This is more for you personally, man. I'm sure when you guys, again, when you're doing your planning, global pandemic and a recession, we're not part of these conversations based on where things ended last year. How have you reacted to this personally?
Well, I've worn long pants probably twice in the last 6 months, so that's new. It's funny. It's one of those things where you think about the world in such a way that you have to consider that these things at any point in time can change. Meaning, what you do is with a family, what you do for work, and how you interact with people, and all the rest. And don't take anything too seriously, because the world is whatever you're comfortable with now. Wait a little while; it's going to change. And I think that adoption of change attitude is a good thing, to make sure people are always thinking that on their feet, and whether they feel solid today or tomorrow. You make sure you lean on folks to be able to understand how you're going to do things. In this world where we're all talking virtually, I've learned to work with my team in different ways. I've created a lot of respect that in addition to the respect I had before for the folks and how they sort of do their daily chores. And as you see them, hey, their dog's doing this, they're making dinner for their child, the kids couldn't go to school because they have to go virtual and stuff. And you make accommodations for that, but you certainly understand that we are all people trying to get things done, and for the good of the company, of course. But it's sort of, it's too clean. When you come to work, you do your job, you get up and you go home. The world has to consider everybody as an individual, but everyone as part of a family when they come to work and try to get their stuff done. So maybe a few things like that are helpful to us.
No, it's a great perspective. We obviously don't leave our lives when we come to work, and we don't leave our work when we go back to our lives. So I think we're seeing that play out in real time by working remotely and living on Zoom meetings all day.
As always, you just said it better than I did, Dan.
Well, thank you very much. And that's all the time we have today. I want to thank you, Andy, for providing your insights on all things out of home. Is very enlightening. And thank you to our audience. Stay tuned for more sessions from Locology 2020. This has been Out of Home, finally a seat at the table. I'm Dan Hite. Thanks for watching.